Loan sharking, a term that evokes images of shadowy figures and desperate deals, is a practice as old as money itself. This ominous term tends to stir up vivid, often unsettling pictures of individuals who operate in the dark corners of society, exploiting desperation and vulnerability for their personal gain. But what exactly is it? What makes this ancient practice continue, and why is it considered a crime in our modern financial systems? At its core, loan sharking is the act of lending money at exceptionally high interest rates. These rates are often so exorbitant that they border on the absurd, making it nearly impossible for the borrower to repay the debt fully. This practice is further characterized by the use of threats, violence, or other forms of intimidation to ensure repayment. The loan shark's primary weapon is fear. Borrowers are often left feeling trapped, unable to escape the ever-tightening financial and psychological noose. Unlike traditional banks and licensed lenders, loan sharks operate outside the codified laws of financial regulation. They exist in a world of economic shadows, making their transactions not just unethical but also unequivocally illegal. They're unbound by the regulations that safeguard borrowers: no credit checks, no repayment schedules, no legal recourse. They operate on a simple yet terrifying premise: you borrow, you owe, you pay, or else. The roots of loan sharking can be traced back to the informal money lending that has existed in societies worldwide for centuries. This alternative financial system has always been a part of human society, filling in the gaps where traditional banking cannot reach. It started as community-based lending as a necessity in times of hardship, but soon turned into an exploitative practice. Loan sharking gained notoriety in the early 20th century, especially during the era of Prohibition in America. It became synonymous with organized crime syndicates who found it to be a lucrative venture. These criminal groups exploited the financially desperate, preying on those unable to secure loans through legal means. Their operations were often complex and far-reaching, leaving a trail of human misery and financial ruin. The imagery associated with loan sharking has changed little in contemporary times. It continues to be a serious problem, often hidden in plain sight, and remains a blight on society. These groups found loan sharking to be a lucrative venture, preying on those unable to secure loans through legal means. With the advent of the internet, loan sharking has evolved, taking on a more insidious form. Now these financial predators lurk in the virtual world, hidden behind the layers of anonymity provided by the digital realm. The latest incarnation of this age-old crime is digital loan sharks, a breed of ruthless predators who have adapted to the digital era. They utilize social media platforms, messaging apps, and even seemingly innocuous online communities to zero in on their potential victims. With the promise of instant, hassle-free loans without the need for credit checks, they ensnare unsuspecting individuals. These startling propositions of easy money, unfortunately, mask a far more sinister reality. The digital facade these loan sharks adopt not only offers them a false sense of legitimacy, but also makes it alarmingly easy for them to cloak their real identities. By hiding behind a screen, they are able to operate across national and even international borders, much beyond the reach of traditional enforcement methods. This digital face of loan sharking doesn't recognize geographical boundaries or jurisdictions. It is not confined to any one country or region. It is a pervasive global issue that affects individuals and communities across the world. Loan sharking manifests in varying degrees of prevalence and legal recognition, making it a complex and multifaceted problem to tackle. Countries worldwide have been grappling with this issue, each adopting unique strategies to combat this menace. Some nations have opted for stringent regulatory measures and harsh penalties for offenders, hoping to deter potential loan sharks. Others have turned to educational programs and public awareness campaigns aimed at empowering potential victims with the knowledge to protect themselves. The breadth and scope of this digital crime necessitate international cooperation. In this context, the sharing of information and best practices between nations has become a critical component in the fight against digital loan sharks. The fight against this ever-evolving crime requires a coordinated global response. International cooperation and information sharing have become crucial in the fight against this ever-evolving crime. Victims of loan sharking are often those found in desperate financial situations. These are individuals who, for one reason or another, find themselves on the brink of financial ruin. The circumstances that lead them to such dire straits can be as varied as the individuals themselves. Some may have experienced sudden job loss or unforeseen medical expenses, while others may be drowning in credit card debt or struggling to keep a small business afloat. Regardless of the reasons, their desperation makes them easy prey for loan sharks. The initial relief these individuals feel when they receive the much-needed cash is indeed palpable. However, this relief is short-lived, sharply overshadowed by the crippling interest rates that soon follow. Often these interest rates exorbitantly high, far surpassing what any traditional financial institution would charge. This leads to a vicious cycle of debt from which escape becomes increasingly difficult. Each payment barely makes a dent in the principal amount, with the majority of the money going towards interest. Moreover, the psychological and physical threats posed by loan sharks only add to the victim's already heavy burden. The fear of reprisal, should they fail to make a payment, creates a climate of fear and helplessness that is almost impossible to break free from. Their lives are dictated by the constant threats and harassment of these unscrupulous individuals, leaving them in a state of perpetual anxiety. Efforts to combat loan sharking have been extensive and varied. These range from law enforcement crackdowns, which aim to apprehend and punish these illegal moneylenders, to legislative measures which cap interest rates and offer some form of protection to borrowers. However, these efforts, while commendable, have not entirely eradicated the problem. Despite these measures, the digital age has given rise to a new breed of loan sharks, operating online and using sophisticated methods to evade detection. These digital loan sharks have taken advantage of technology to cast their nets wider, reaching more victims and further complicating efforts to bring them to justice. Their operations are largely covert, carried out under the guise of legitimate lending platforms, making them difficult to identify and even harder to apprehend. The allure of easy money makes loan sharking a persistent problem. This criminal activity has etched itself into the fabric of society, exploiting the weak and desperate, those who are perhaps struggling to make ends meet, or those who are enticed by the charm of quick cash. The tantalizing illusion of instant resolution to critical financial issues is a deceptive trap, a perilous maze that entraps the unwary siren call, luring unsuspecting victims into the abyss of everlasting debt. A closer look at loan sharking reveals the intricate mechanics involved. The predator-prey relationship as old as time itself, where the weak and vulnerable are exploited and entrapped. Deceptive practices, excessive interest rates, and ruthless collection tactics, the hallmarks of this hazardous enterprise. It is a clandestine operation, thriving in the shadows, preying on the desperate, feeding on their hopes and dreams. At the heart of the solution lies education and awareness. To fight the menace of loan sharking, it is imperative for us to understand its workings and the tactics employed by these modern-day predators. Recognizing the signs of loan sharking, exorbitant interest rates, aggressive collection methods, and secretive transactions, is the first step towards defense. Equally important is the knowledge of legal avenues available for financial help. It is essential to promote the use of legitimate lending institutions, discourage borrowing from unregulated sources, and encourage financial literacy. In a world where money is a necessity, understanding the importance of legal and ethical lending practices can go a long way in safeguarding individuals from falling into the trap set by these modern-day predators. In conclusion, loan sharking is not just a financial crime. What we need to realize is that it's much more than just a simple monetary transaction gone wrong. It's a convoluted web of deceit, manipulation, and exploitation that targets the most susceptible individuals in our society. These are people who might be struggling to make ends meet, to put food on the table, or to keep their businesses afloat. This predatory practice is not just about the ruthless lending of money at exorbitantly high interest rates. It goes deeper than that. It's about the psychological manipulation that takes place, the fear and intimidation that the victims experience, the often violent coercion that forces them to comply with the outrageous terms of the loan. It's about the entrapment of these individuals into a cycle of debt that they can never hope to escape from. We're not just talking about a financial crime here, but something that is deeply rooted in our societal structure. It's a reflection of the stark disparities that exist in our society, the glaring gaps between the haves and the have-nots. It speaks volumes about the systemic issues that continue to plague us, the lack of adequate safeguards and financial literacy that allow such practices to thrive. The impact of loan sharking extends beyond the immediate victims. It affects families, tearing them apart as they grapple with the financial and emotional toll that this takes. It impacts communities, fostering an environment of fear and mistrust. It reaches into the heart of our economy, destabilizing it and throwing it off balance. What we need to do is not just condemn this practice but take active steps to combat it. We need to educate ourselves and others about the dangers of loan sharking, to provide support to those who have fallen prey to it, and to create a society where such exploitation is not only discouraged but actively prevented, but a societal issue that preys on the vulnerable.